Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres. My husband Henry and I live on 43 acres in northern Arizona at an altitude of about 5,280 feet. And we garden a lot. We're gardening right now in the middle of the winter, and we garden all summer, spring, and fall. And we provide a huge percentage of our vegetables from our own garden. Recently, we've been getting a lot of questions from new gardeners. How do I figure out all these terms? There's all this terminology out there, the special words, and I'm confused. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things you really need to understand. One of the things we hear about a lot is growing zones. Are you in 7A, 6B, 9A? What are you? Okay. I'm not going to tell you that grow zones are not important, because they are. But when are they important? Well, they're important when you're growing fruit trees and fruit bushes. Why? Because fruit trees and bushes have different needs than the annuals. Annuals are the things that we grow like in our garden. They bloom, and then they're gone at the end of the season when they freeze. Or they're gone at the end of the season when we decide that it's not fashionable to have them in our location anymore, depending on what you're doing. When you're growing a fruit tree, that tree has a need for what they call chill hours. Now, are there plants that don't? I'm sure there probably are. But the things that people usually want to grow, apples, cherries, pears, things that we would buy at the grocery store, like that, they all have chill hour requirements. What exactly is a chill hour? They also call them chill units sometimes, but chill hours will do well enough. It's the amount of time that your environment spends between 32 degrees and 45 degrees. Now, you'll hear people who live, say, down along the Gulf Coast or in Florida say that they just can't grow apples or they just can't grow this other tree. And it's because, not of disease or heat usually, it's usually because they don't get enough cold during the winter to make those plants think that they've gone through winter. Apples were naturally something that grew farther north. And as we move into warmer parts of the United States and wanted to have apples and stuff, we discovered that the apples that grew really well in Maine and Massachusetts and Connecticut and Michigan and Wisconsin, they would not bloom and set fruit in Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama. So they developed specific varieties that will tolerate that short chill area or require almost none. And what you need to do if you're going to grow fruit trees in that part of the world is either go to a local reputable, why did I say that so many times? Because if you're just going to a big box store, it may not work. But if you go to a reputable nursery that is counting on their reputation locally to stay alive in this crazy world that we live in now, they will know what varieties will work where you are. If you're ordering online, I highly recommend that you stick with some of the more reputable fruit tree companies. Somebody like, and I get nothing from these people, somebody like Stark, for instance, will have a spot on their website when you first come in that says, put your zip code in here, and then we will tell you whether you can grow our trees or not in that location. Sometimes it'll be borderline, or they may not actually recommend it. Say, in our area, it's too cold for citrus. But if I had a controlled environment, like a Chinese greenhouse or something else, or some other heated structure where it would be bright enough for me to grow fruit trees, I could grow them. But they're thinking in terms of, I'm growing it outside somewhere. So you want to grow apples, You put your zip code in there, and when you start searching through, it will say, these will all grow in your area, or no, we don't recommend that. Very helpful as a beginner. You don't want to buy something that is a setup for disaster. When we first moved here, we did not realize how much of a difference there was in climate between our area and just 55 miles south of here. And 55 miles south of here, they frequently sell plants that will not overwinter here. That means if you want to grow them as an annual, you can. But a lot of these plants do so much better as a perennial. A perennial is a plant that comes back every year. We just decided that it wasn't worth growing those plants because it's very disappointing. You manage to keep them alive. A girlfriend gave me one, and I loved it. And it was awesome, and I managed to keep it alive for 2 years. And then it died. We just had an extra cold winter, and I had done all the things I could do. I wrapped it up. I buried it in stuff to keep it from getting frozen, and it still froze. Just the way it is. If the USDA grow zones are kind of a waste of time if you're growing just a regular garden. Why? Because all they do is tell you what the average, low, and high are. And their big focus is on low because, you know, you're freezing, obviously. Okay, so I'm the same. I'm a 7B by most of the charts, although we're kind of, I'm finding at some of the couple of the charts now, they're not really sure where we are. It's because this microclimate's like crazy around here. 7B is the same as some areas in Missouri, which have almost nothing in common with our climate. Zero. They have a much longer growing season. They have way more rain. So how do I choose something that really is relevant to my starting a garden? Well, first and last days of frost are the most important things. You know, people who live in the South and who have always lived in the South often do not understand that just because they can plant their potatoes in February or March means that I should plant my potatoes in February or March. I cannot plant my potatoes in February or March unless I'm going to plant them in a greenhouse, and then it's going to have to be at least a semi-heated greenhouse, or I'm going to freeze them and make them rot. My ground outside right now is frozen. It was 26 when I woke up this morning, degrees Fahrenheit, and it is going to be approximately that temperature at night for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's January. It's winter. You know, I can't think about planting anything outside for months. My last date of frost. Okay. How do I find that out? It gives you a couple of websites you can go to that will help you find out what your last date of frost is. Now, last date of frost is not a guarantee that you will never get frost. It is a statistical number. That means if here's the date that they give you, let's pick a date, a random date, June 1st, okay? That means that I believe it is 80% of the time June 1st will be safe. That means that 20% of the time it's not safe. That means that 20% of the time you'll have frost later in June than that. Okay? So you're always playing a numbers game. Think of it as running the slots, playing cards. You are dealt the hand that you are dealt. Every year will be different, but you can hedge your bets by knowing when your last day of frost is, deciding how much you want to push that last day of frost, and being prepared to cover things if there's going to be an unpredicted frost. So, what do I mean by that? Okay, our last day of frost is about, I'd have to check what they're saying it is right now. Oh, well, here I have it written down here as being the 15th of May. Okay. There are people who have their gardens in full swing by the 15th of May. There are things I can plant before the last day of frost. There have been years when we were having frost solidly into the beginning of June. There have been years when we didn't have frost after about April 15th. So when you garden, it is a betting game, so to speak. You're always betting that you're going to be able to make this work, figure it out, and somehow overcome Mother Nature. Now, there's times when Mother Nature goes squish, and no matter what you do, it's just not going to work. If you cannot cope with that, do not garden. If you are not prepared to have a plant die for some unknown reason that you can't figure out ever, don't garden. But I don't want to be a negative Nancy here. I want to encourage people to garden. So what I say is, take your chances. My husband Henry always says, if you want a guarantee, buy a toaster. And I would add to that, and make sure it's from a big box store that will let you bring back anything, no matter what. Because I have bought something new, an electronics item, gotten it home, plugged it in, and went, this just plain doesn't work. I took it back to a big box store, and they went, oh, I'm terribly sorry. Do you want to just trade this in for the same thing, except one that works? Or do you want a refund? And I said, oh, I like this model. It just, yeah. So I got a new one off the shelf, and they gave me the go-ahead, and I walked back out the door. It's not quite like that with plants. If you kill it, it's dead. On the other hand, sometimes people will give up on a plant because it's wilted or something like that, and sometimes they're salvageable. But that's something we'll talk about later. So you figured out when your last frost date is. Now what do you do? Well, you have to figure out what you're going to plant. And I will say this every day from now till the cows come home and afterwards. Do not grow things that you do not like. I see people say this all the time. I'm the only one in my family that will eat this. Okay. Then figure out how much you're going to be able to eat and grow that. If the whole rest of your family hates, pick a vegetable, okra. Okay? Okra is one of those things you love or hate. I love it cooked properly. If no one in your family likes okra, don't grow it unless you're being paid to grow it by someone else. So if I'm a market gardener, for instance, and I know that if I bring a vegetable like okra, for instance, to the market garden, to the farmer's market, I'm going to be able to sell every pod I grow. I'm going to be growing okra if I can sell it for a decent price. If you don't like a vegetable, you're not trying to sell it, you're not trying to raise seedlings and sell them in a market situation. If you don't like it, don't grow it. Don't grow it just because, well, my neighbor grows this and it does really well for them, so I should grow it too. What are you going to do with it once you grew it? Give it to your neighbor? He's already got stuff that's growing really well. That doesn't make sense. We live in an area with limited resources. Our biggest limitation is water. A plant, in order to stay happy and healthy, requires, like fruit trees, for instance, they say 1 inch to 1.5 inches, and I would err on the side of 1.5 inches to 2 inches during the heat of the summer, of water. Say it's 2 feet. Okay? I have 2 square feet under that tree. I need to be able to give that 2 square feet, 1 inch deep in water, at least once a week, or my tree is not going to thrive. It might stay alive for a while, but it's not going to thrive. And that is one of the things I emphasize for people who are growing in drought-stricken areas like the American Southwest. There are also parts of the rest of the United States that are dry. Some of them have always been dry. Some of them are drier now than they were before. If you're going to grow a garden, and I will honestly say I don't care where you are these days, you have got to be prepared to irrigate. And I don't mean setting up the big pipes and sprayers and stuff like the professional farmers have. I mean whether you're hauling a watering bucket or what you're doing, you need to be prepared to water that plant in order to keep it alive. And not just alive, but thriving. So think about your resources. but it's spring now. Not quite, but we're getting towards spring. I need to be planting my garden. So how the heck do I do that? Well, I have lists. I'll be honest. I have this beast. And I don't know if we can read that or not, but it says garden on there. And I have several years in this 3-ring binder. And I have many more years in little composition notebook. In addition to that sort of information about what I grew and when and how it did, this particular 3-ring binder also has some other things. It has maps of the beds that we have here and the years, and there's always a year written on the top because we have modified our garden over years. There are instructions. What do I have instructions for? I have instructions for a specific long-distance thermostat that we use in the greenhouse that has a base station in the kitchen, so I can glance when I'm walking through the kitchen and see what the temperature in the greenhouse is. Okay? I also have information sheets on growing specific vegetables. Some companies, let's see, who have I gotten them from? I think I've gotten them from Hoss Tools, and I think I've gotten them from Johnny's. I keep those things in here. So for instance, 9 million years ago, we bought rootstock from Johnny's Selected Seed for rhubarb. Okay? And here I have the instructions. What they said, how to plant it, how to fertilize it, how to do weed control, how to harvest it, all that other kind of stuff, and how often to divide crowns and all that kind of stuff. I don't have to wonder where it is. I don't have to go on the internet and hope I have internet connection because we haven't had very good internet connection lately. It's right there in the bookmarked garden. But it's, like I said, early in the springtime, kind of winter time sort of thing, and I am looking at what I need for this coming year. And how do I decide that? Well, one of the things I used to do was I used to literally just take a stack of seed catalogs that came in the mail and start flipping through them. And, oh, that's a lot of fun. And I still have to admit, I love to browse through, look at all the pretty pictures, and I occasionally get hooked that way. Not all the companies have good seed catalogs anymore. Some of them have gone strictly online. It's sad because I really do like paper. I'm a paper person. But I understand it costs a fortune to print out catalogs. So for financial reasons, a lot of companies had to go away from them. Also, by the time you print your catalog, chances are it's out of date. You've probably added a couple of things. You may have subtracted a couple of things that are already sold out. So people are going to have to go online or call in to order anyway. And if you're calling in, I highly recommend you have some additional options listed on your paper just in case you call in and find out they don't have that. Or you can ask them for recommendations. I mean, I think most of the companies are good at who have people answering. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of the companies, Johnny's could make recommendations. I'm sure Hoss Tools could. Probably Parks or Harris. Some of the other guys, I don't know. I have never dealt with them online, on the phone to know whether they could make suggestions or not. But how do I decide what to do? Well, I have my list. And the first thing I do is, if you have not done this before and you're trying to figure out, well, how do I even grow a list, is I will put a list as a PDF on our website, and Henry will put a link to it in the show notes. And all it's going to be is a list of possible vegetables. Now, I'm not going to include fruits in this, and I'm not going to include flowers, because right now we're just talking about vegetables. I'll put up a list, and what I do at the beginning of every season is I simply go down that list. Okay, do we want to grow artichokes this year? I have grown artichokes before. I didn't find them to be particularly successful here. We're in a borderline area. I probably didn't water them enough. Maybe in the future I might consider doing them again, but probably not this year. So that doesn't go on that doesn't get checked off as something I'm going to do. I literally just cross it out. What else starts with an A? Asparagus, okay? We have an asparagus bed. You buy asparagus as rootstock, and you create a permanent bed. They are a perennial, and they come back every year if you take care of them. They require quite a bit of water, and they require a decent amount of fertilizer, and you have to keep them weeded. So if you're not willing to do that, don't grow asparagus. And I just go down the list like that, and I decide which things I'm going to grow. Then I go to Johnny Selected Seeds website, and I'm going to point you at them. They give me zero, except bills occasionally when I buy seeds from them. But here's the problem. I haven't found anybody who has a better setup than they have. They have planners that you can use to help you figure out when you need to plant things. So I go to Johnny Selected Seeds website, which is just www.johnnyseeds.com. Then I go to the Growers Library. You'll see it up along the top. There's a bar there, and it'll say Growers Library. It'll be on your far right-hand side of the screen, on your computer screen. And you'll click on Growers Library, and you'll go down to the category called Planning Tools and Calculators. And they have so many things there. Now, some of it's irrelevant for most of us. If we're just growing a small garden, we don't need to know how many hundreds of pounds of bean seeds I need for this many acres and stuff like that. They have that kind of stuff in there. They have all those kind of planners. But they also have one called Seed Starting Date Calculator for Seedlings. Or seeds, I get maybe it's just Seed Starting Date Calculator. And you click on that, and it brings up a page. And they'll say, enter frost-free date, include year. So you need to know what your frost-free date is. You plop that frost-free date in there, you click enter, and magically, they will give you a printout that will say crop, number of weeks to start seeds before setting out date, when to start inside, and it'll give you a date range on that, because it's not one day. It's, you can start anywhere in this, say from, for instance, for basil, you can start any date after April 15th inside. But for beets, you could start anywhere from the 20th of March through the 3rd of April. So, it gives you a range usually. So there are occasionally things where, like for basil, it's just giving you one because you can do it any time after that through the whole summer. Save time to set out plants relative frost-free date, and it'll tell you that frost-free date is your magic date, remember. Now, you still have to be paying attention. You have to be watching the weather, and you have to have a plan. And I can't tell you what percentage of times our plan does not work, but it's a fairly high percentage of times around here because our weather is all over the place. So if our frost-free date is May 15th, it could either be warmer or it could be colder. Statistically for us, we'll get the plants in the ground and then suddenly the weather will completely change, and either we're having a windstorm which will shred the plants if we're not careful, so we have to keep them covered, or we're having cold temperatures that are too cold for that type of plant. There have been times when on May 15th, we have brought absolutely every one of the plants out of the greenhouse that was tender, like peppers and tomatoes and stuff like that, and stuck them in the dining room. My entire kitchen and dining room were covered with big plants that were ready to go out in the garden, because it was going to drop down to 20 degrees and we couldn't guarantee to keep the greenhouse warm enough. So, it sounds a little draconian. A lot of places have milder weather than we do. But this list, I print them out. I printed this out back in 2019. I can tell that because the date that I entered here was 5/15/2019. And I have used it every year since. It lets me figure out when I need to plant. And it is a total godsend. I hope this helps you guys figure out things. I sure as heck wish I'd had something like this when I first got started. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because we're going to be talking lots more. Probably one of the next things we'll talk about is what to do if you don't have something like this, you don't have computer access, you don't want to do this kind of stuff, you're only growing a couple of things. Keep it simple. I'll leave off that last word because we all know what it is. So until next time, bye.